one of the things that completely changed for me is that whenever I started moving from a reactive state of living into a proactive state of living, where I started being strategic in creating goals and thinking ahead of planning out what do I want life to look like, instead of just sitting back and waiting for what things would come my way.
This is Intentionally Ever After. Join intentional lifestyle coach Joe Bukartek for a series of personal conversations and coaching sessions with various people about how living with intention shows up for them.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Intentionally Ever After. Today, I am very much looking forward to the conversation I'm about to have with the one, the only, Mr. Jeremy Hezlep. Jeremy, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me, Joe.
Yeah, man. I'm very happy to have you here. Jeremy, will you kindly introduce yourself to folks?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Jeremy Hezlep. I live here in Franklin, Tennessee. I've had the privilege of knowing Joe since high school, and unfortunately for us, that means that's like over 20 years ago, and we haven't seen each other in a very, very long time. So we recently connected. Live here in Tennessee with my wife, Amber. We've been married for 18 years. I have two kids, and I have a pretty good history and background in sales, recruiting, and leadership. So that's me.
That's you in a nutshell. And one of your highest achievements is being my friend from high school.
Yeah, I would think so, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, good. Just to clear that up from the very beginning. Jeremy, I'd like to do something with you that I have not yet done, but I would like to moving forward. And that's to essentially treat these questions that I've given you in advance kind of in a rapid fire response. Yeah. And then we'll kind of get back through each of them. You ready for that?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Here we go. Jeremy, what does it mean to live intentionally?
I believe that living intentionally is moving from reactive living to proactive living.
Ooh, solid. What is one change in habit that has had an exponential payoff?
Nightly communication with my wife.
What have you said no to that has made a significant impact in your life?
Anything that doesn't put my family first.
Love it. What area in your life feels just about perfect?
Well, nothing's perfect, but my relationship with my wife, Amber, is pretty solid right now.
Who is someone you admire, and what do you admire about them?
Darren Tyler. He is my pastor and friend, and he's just a world changer.
That's awesome. And what do you imagine some people admire about you?
I'm a really solid problem solver.
Sweet. And this concludes the inaugural version of Rapid Fire Questions. Thank you for participating. You nailed that one. Nailed it.
We did it.
We did a great job. I think we both did a great job on that one. Yeah, all in all. All right. Can we please dig into that very first and baseline question of what does it mean to live intentionally? Yeah. And I love the way you very succinctly put that. And we maybe pull it out a little bit.
Yeah.
Deeper.
Absolutely. I think this, when you think of intentional living, to me, that hits home in a lot of different ways because I've lived a lot of my life. I would consider, I didn't realize how I wasn't being intentional. And one of the things that completely changed for me is that whenever I started moving from a reactive state of living into a proactive state of living, where I started being strategic in creating goals and thinking ahead of planning out what do I want life to look like, instead of just sitting back and waiting for what things would come my way.
So what's an example of your former self who would have been living in a reactive state? Because I don't, we've chatted a little bit to catch up recently, and it's not like you've been, twiddling your thumbs and being this, very sluggish, ineffective, unproductive person, right? So what's an example of a reactive state that you might have previously been in?
Well, I think the thing is, one of the misconceptions could be that you're not achieving things when you are when I was being reactive, I still was achieving a lot of things. I still had a lot going on. I just realized that I was reacting to the environment around me a lot more than I was trying to put an impact uh, on it myself. So, um, for instance, the person we'll get to talking about a little bit later, Darren Tyler, he came to me years ago with this idea of helping these kids, help feeding these kids in Haiti. And it was one of those things that it was brought to our attention. We had a mutual friend who had just been there, and I connected with him. Just said, "Hey, let's do this. Let's feed these kids." And we started a nonprofit organization, and we started feeding kids on a daily basis in Haiti, and that just grew and expanded. During that time, I wouldn't say that I was living very intentionally most of the time. I had a set of standards of who I was. I had uh, a faith part of me has always been very, very strong and helped guide decision making. I knew what was right and wrong in my head. However, my day to day didn't necessarily look very intentional. So you can launch a nonprofit. I could be working a job that I'm enjoying and doing well, and at the same time, I could be feeling like, and did in that period of time, like I was just very reactive, like things were coming to me. But if it was anything that required me to be thinking proactively ahead, I wasn't doing that. And that all changed when I started adjusting what my mornings looked like. I started adjusting um, who I hung out with. I started adjusting what food I ate in my body, what all of those kind of things, what kind of exercise looked like. And at that moment, when those things started happening over a period of time, that's when I started feeling like I was intentionally living.
So was there a starting moment? Was it from when you first met this person or when you first started talking about this nonprofit? Like what was there a moment or seminal moment? Was there a time period, a phase when you were starting to click in? Because obviously you had heard that successful people get up at it early and, we know
Yeah.
these truths, right? So what was it that clicked for you, or when did it become meaningful and start to motivate you?
Yeah, 12 years ago, my wife and I were invited to go to an event to hear a speaker named Dave Ramsey. And it was a guy I'd never heard of before. She had listened to him on the radio, had heard some things about money. I knew nothing about him. But we were invited, we were given free tickets. We sat in the very top row of this arena, and I honestly just didn't want to be there. And over the course of a few hours, I heard him start talking about money in a way that I'd never heard anybody talk about. And it talked about how you can be intentional and what does a budget actually look like and what does it look like. And I didn't realize it, but if I look at it now, he was saying that here's how you are intentional with your money. I remember leaving that day totally inspired because I heard this person talking about how you and your spouse could be on the same page with money. But you have to talk about it. You have to put a game plan together, and here's how to do that. And we went through a curriculum that he had called Financial Peace University, and it helped us realize that we had some debt in our life. And here was the game plan. Here's how you can help. And it wasn't like a get rich quick scheme. It
Mhm.
wasn't like, give me any of your money. Like, in fact, actually, he wasn't asking for any of our money. He was just sharing what he had learned. So
Yeah.
my wife and I jumped all in on that. And we paid off all of our debt in about an 8 month period of time. It was $28,000. And all of a sudden we found ourselves completely debt free. Now, this isn't just a conversation about money, but I realized in that process of being intentional of, hey, wait a minute. So we should get together. We should actually talk about our money. We should put a plan together. I didn't realize, but all of a sudden I was being intentional with my money and intentional in conversations. And I realized that Amber and I, for the first time, we were married for 6 years at that time. And all of a sudden we started realizing that when we started talking about our money, we started talking more about everything, and we started talking about our goals, and we started talking about what do we want life to look like, and all of a sudden it started extending to where do we want to live,
Mhm.
what are our we didn't have kids at that time, and so we were like, okay, what do we want kids to look like? It just started extending into all of these other areas. And so I really credit that day in that arena is when a whole bunch of life changed for Amber and I.
Wow. Yeah, that's so interesting, right? Because we hear things like money isn't everything, right? But money affects or is affected. It's connected to so many things, right? In different
Yeah,
parts of our lives.
absolutely.
And it
Right.
sounds like it gave you this new framework to kind
Yeah.
of like, a new way to communicate to your wife, it sounds like, right? And
Yeah. It was
through
this
talking
very
about money.
basic. It was just a basic thing. It was like, hey, once a month, get together and talk about what you want to spend your money on. Put a plan together, and then when you do that, then you can walk through the month. And and part of that, he was like, hey, and you know what? Spend money on yourself. Give
Mhm.
yourself money to have for spending. And what we started noticing was like when we did that, she'd come home with bags, and I'd never like, well, how much did you spend? Or if I went to get something, she didn't care because we had already planned it out. It gave us more freedom because we had talked
Wow.
about it. And then that also started a framework of what could regular communication look like. Because we would have said at that time, oh yeah, we're great communicators, but we never like set times where we would sit and set goals together or talk about our plans or what do we want the future to look like. It would just be like, hey, did this happen in between watching episodes of Friends or out to eat?
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting. Right. That's great. So going back in time, you already admitted that you probably didn't want to be there at that presentation, right?
Yeah.
What would you have been doing instead on a typical evening or day?
Mm. That honestly, at that time, my wife and I we were seeing a lot of movies.
Yeah.
We would a typical date night, we would go to see something regular. We'd go out to eat a lot, and I mean, we still love to do that as well. So don't we did go out to eat and see a movie a couple days ago,
Yeah.
but that would have been it. Wouldn't have been out searching for something to better ourselves for sure.
Well, isn't that interesting though? You get to still do the things you would have always done. And now you've benefited exponentially
Hmm.
because, your wife probably quote unquote forced you to go do this thing or encouraged you
Yeah,
strongly, probably. Yeah.
she did encourage me strongly.
I love that. That's great. So on a day to day, what does it look like for you to live with intention?
This is actually about the last 2 years. I started reading more than ever before
Yeah.
because I started noticing that the people in my life who I really respect, who have done a lot in life, they're very like voracious readers.
Mm,
And I started noticing, and I'm like, I'm not. Like, when is the last time I'd read something? And outside of, I'd be good to if there's something in my field or some kind of business book that a bunch of people I was working with, we all decided to read together. So it's not like I wasn't reading at all,
mhm.
but I just decided to start reading and have that be a regular part of my day, a regular part of my week. I have a mixture of things that are leadership books, business books, and fun. One
Mhm.
of the, one of my highlights of last year is my son Micah loves this book series called The Green Ember, and they're like warrior rabbits,
Uh-huh.
and there's all these books. SD Smith is the author, and my wife and him and my daughter, they all were getting into them, and they'd read together during the day or at night, um, and he's like, "Hey, Daddy, will you read that?" And meanwhile, I'm sitting here reading like some big business book and thinking like I'm like all big and bad because I'm reading that. But
Right.
I read that book and I loved it. It was, and I realized that that is my reading level, true at heart.
That's great. That really fuels you. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so we did four of those books, and we started listening to the audiobooks of the other parts of the series on trips. And uh, I think that there's something about that fiction side of things that is, if you don't have the fiction side along with the nonfiction, then your brain just gets a little stale. And I had
Mm,
more creativity after listening to this rabbit named Pickett save the day on some things, and
yeah.
I felt like it unlocked some creativity for me last year.
That's cool. And it touches on the theme that have kind of come out in your rapid fire questions about family,
Yeah.
through the lens of family, what is best for my
Mhm.
family. Um, I want to get into the next question of one change in habit that has had an exponential payoff. Touched on it a little bit already. Would you kindly dig in a little deeper?
So that's the part of the reading,
Hmm.
right? I wrote down three things. I talked about the budgeting. I
Yeah.
was kind of brainstorming what is a big habit. Um, outside of, let's just say for fun,
Mm,
I, you and I, one of the things we connected on, we started talking about was pickleball
right.
and America's fastest growing sport. Um, Joe, did you hear that? This is total
Ready.
rabbit or squirrel, really. Did you hear that more people last year played pickleball than played golf in the U.S.?
No, no,
Yeah,
that is
I
interesting.
read
I
that.
believe it, given
Yeah,
what I see around me.
it's more
100%.
accessible, more affordable, all these types of things. Doesn't take 4 hours, all that. But um, changing of habits, that's hard for me because I'm I'm not someone who's at times is always extremely disciplined, and I work hard at that. So the habits that I've been doing, I've been reading at night,
Hmm.
trying to do that, making sure I go whole periods of time without social media at all, just because I find myself distracted.
Hmm.
That my wife Amber and I have a really good routine now of just nightly communication. We'll talk about our days. Not afraid to talk about feelings. Hey, how did you feel about that when that happened to you? We actually started praying together every night, which is a big deal. Changed our relationship quite a bit, and then also doing our monthly budgeting sessions and then weekly check-ins has been a big deal
Yeah.
for us.
Yeah. So is there some sort of ceremony around your conversations, your prayers, your meetings? Sounds like maybe with a budget meeting, there's a framework. Do you have some kind of, okay, it's 8 o'clock, we're gonna do this thing now, or what
No,
does that look
no,
like logistically?
it's really. I mean, I'm definitely am the one that wants to go to bed before she does,
Mhm.
because I mean I get up at 4:30 to get to pickleball by 5:30, so she's not up then. So I'm the
Yeah.
one initiating it. It's time to go to bed. But it's not like, oh, here's this time, and now we need to. All right, you need to tell me your stuff. It just kind of turned into like, hey, every night there's this check in after we put the kids down. Hey, how are you doing?
Yeah.
What was something in your day? The thing that we did, the nightly nightly prayers was a game changer for us. We both have been actively involved in our faith and our church our whole lives, and we just found ourselves uh, wanting like, and desiring, like, hey, what if we prayed together?
Yeah.
And so right before bed, we'll pray, and it's just been this really great like calming moment for us, where there's something too. We pray out loud, like that's just it felt weird at first, even
Yeah.
having faith be an element of our entire lives, 41 years that's been apart. Um, but something that just helped kind of bond us of like, there's this theme of wanting to be part of something that's bigger than ourselves.
Mhm.
And when you do something like prayer or communicate intentionally talking to your spouse, that's me saying to her, I care about you. I want to hear what you have to say. And I feel like that's what prayer does with us. Is like, hey, we can have our own plans, but there's something bigger than us that we want to be a part of.
And to do that on a nightly basis just seems
Mhm.
like it would be so rejuvenating.
Yeah, it is. It's been very unifying for us in a lot of different ways. So we're real
So
happy
you,
about that.
yeah, yeah, it sounds like, so it sounds like you've taken the adage of never go to bed angry,
Yeah,
right? And you've
that's true.
really like gotten real specific about that. It's not that that was the goal to not go to bed angry, but
Right.
you actually made it useful to you and meaningful to you. Can I ask a further detailed
Sure.
question about them?
Ask me
So,
anything.
so step by step, do you start with your prayer aloud? Does she go second? Is there, how do you run these things?
Yeah.
I,
No.
I
It's
understand it's probably organic and it's very
yep.
smooth, but for someone who maybe wants to try this, whether they commit to one night every night or just try doing it once,
Yeah.
how
And
do
I
you
want to
do
say
it?
that And I want to say that like there are times that if she's out with her friends, somebody's watching a movie, going to bed, like that's we're not weird about it. Where it's like, all right, now everybody stop what we're doing or anything like that. It's just kind of sometimes it is us together talking through some big things of life, and we just
Yeah.
want to just toss that up in a prayer. And
Mhm.
sometimes it's just a posture of thankfulness where one of us, typically just one of us, just will say a quick prayer, and it's
Yeah.
just like, hey, this was a really cool day. We got to do these amazing things, and just want to be thankful and grateful for that, and don't want to take it for granted. We realize with our kids in the spot, even though we've been married 18 years, our kids are about Micah's about to be 9 and Lily's 6.5. we waited a while. My wife did music professionally and toured all over the world, so there were some periods of time where uh, we didn't have kids, and so we realized that right now we're in those days that some would call the good old days. That we recognize that there is a point in life where we look back and realize this is that spot where our
Mm,
kids want to cuddle, where our kids want time with us, where they say daddy, not dad, where uh, on a walk with my son, he held my hand the other day.
yeah.
And I was like, this isn't forever that happens. And so we are really trying to pause in these moments and just be grateful and just thankful that we're here.
Hmm.
And so I think that's what that is. That's more of what this is right now. This isn't uh, a prayer time that's trying to like the Santa Claus. Would you give me this? Would you give me this? This is more of a posture of us. Hey, we're thankful and grateful. We'd like to be led.
Hmm.
That kind of thing.
That's great. I'm also hearing a theme of this is how you want to engage with one another as a family, right? This is how you
Yeah.
connect with one another. This is how you speak with one another, to one another, how you help strengthen one another. Um, I would suggest, from my perspective and opinion, here it comes. That's what
Hmm.
it is.
All right, let's do it.
They're all the good old days if you want them to be, right? I mean, I am very interested in your wife being a professional, world renowned singer. And those likely were the good old days then as well, I imagine. And I know I heard indirectly that you jump into the band when necessary, when called upon, right? And
Yep.
like that sounds cool. That sounds like definitely like that is the good old days, right? And at
Yeah.
some point when your kids start calling you dad and you go hang out in a different venue, maybe no more hand
Hmm.
holdings, but guess what? That's going to be the good old days. I think because of the way that you guys choose to engage with one another now, I imagine that's going to carry you on moving forward. If I may
Yeah.
be so bold.
No. I think you're totally right, and that is the game plan for life is to have that be. I have part of being in your 40s and having a 6.5-year-old is that I get to be this mixture of a lot of my friends of teenagers,
Yeah.
or one of my best friends is actually he just became a grandpa, and we're a year and a half age difference. They got married real young, had a honeymoon
Yeah.
baby, and
Yeah.
then their oldest got married. And the reason I talk about it as the good old days is there seems to be, in my experience, something about as the kids get older, as they leave the house, all these things that there's this yearning back or looking back to that time where things were
Mm.
simple. Because I'm very
Mm.
well aware of the kids start driving when there's complexity coming, there's levels of intensity that I'm really looking forward to. Like
Yeah.
I look forward to when Micah can beat me in a big game of basketball in our driveway, and because I know that's coming. There's those kind of things that I know and I anticipate, and then I also think that I'll look back to that. Last night I carried my daughter up to bed. She just asked, "Will you carry me up to bed?" And that is something special that I know is not here forever.
Yeah. Yeah. Jeremy, if you recall back when we first were in each other's lives, I was a runner in high school and I wasn't
Mhm.
the best, but I was not terrible. Well, my 12-year-old is now a faster runner than I am already. And it happened a lot sooner than I thought it would. Um,
That's both
but
awesome and disappointing.
it is. Yeah. Those are exactly the things. Those are the things. So anytime there's a 5K in town and I get both of those emotions like, oh, he's going to beat me. But
Wow,
it's exciting. It's
that's
the
impressive.
next phase. It is impressive. Well, that's also true. I mean, he's a fast little guy as well. But again, these to me are the good old days as well.
Nice.
All right. What have you said no to that has made a significant impact in your life?
So I was really thinking I wanted to come with like this one example,
Yeah, yeah,
and I really struggled with it. But I will say, well, you know what? I'll give you one example.
yeah.
There's a golf league at my office that I really would love to be a part of. But one of the things that I have said in my life is that I want to set up my life so that way I put my kids to bed pretty much every night. Like I
Hmm.
want to be there at bedtime. And part of that is because my dad was very intentional with that. I remember him even through high school. sitting on my bed asking me about my day at the end.
Mhm.
And I think back about those conversations, and I think that's why he and I still have such a great relationship still to this day. And so I just have this idea that I want as often as possible to do that. And I've had a lot of opportunities in my life. I lead a team in my office and actively involved in my church, but I'm an elder at our church. So I'm involved with a lot of strategy planning. And we've been asked to be uh, on a bunch of different boards in the past. And when I look at the time commitments and things like that, and I just say, sorry, I'll gladly consult, I'll gladly be around. I have a meeting this afternoon with a guy who would ask that. And I said, no, but here's my time frame that I have. And if you can make that work, then I'd gladly help consult as you're looking to grow. And because one of the things that I have found is that in my life, I do have certain skills now. I was talking to somebody yesterday about that, where I'd say something when I was 25 years old, it might have been right, but for some reason that came across as arrogance. Now
Mm.
you have 20 years of experience in an industry or leading teams and things like that. You can say the same thing in your 40s, and all of a sudden it's looked at totally different.
Wisdom. Yeah, it's wisdom. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
wisdom. It's like the gray hairs that are coming in the beard.
Yeah.
And I realized I did the same thing when it meant something different when I talked to somebody who was just starting business to somebody who might be my mentor who's 60 some years old and has done a lot. So I really am intentional when uh, I allow myself to have fun, of course.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I love going to Predator games here, and that's a really great thing to do here in Nashville.
Yeah.
That fan base is really great, and I have a buddy with season tickets, and I go as often as I can. So I do those fun things. So don't hear me say that I'm just like sitting around. I'm actively involved in the pickleball community, all these different things. But if somebody's like, "Hey, will you come to do this thing on a Tuesday night?" and I look and realize I have another event that week, or if I've been spending a bunch of time away from the family, I will say no,
Right.
and I won't feel guilty about it. I heard somebody say once that you're going to always disappoint someone. You just get to choose who you disappoint.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's fair. I think that's a
And so,
valid point.
so I'm just choosing. I'm not going to disappoint my family, or I'm not going to
Yeah.
disappoint my wife.
Yeah. No, that's great. That seems very clear, very simple, straightforward. Is there something on the horizon or currently that you think that there's a no that you haven't yet developed that you think is probably
Hmm.
coming down the pike that would benefit you?
Hmm. I can't think of anything
Okay,
right
let's
off the
what
bat.
would your wife say? Would your wife have the insider perspective to say, you need to stop, or because our loved ones usually figure these things out a little before we do.
Yeah, so believe it or not, we've been talking about that quite a bit. We not too long ago looked at all the uh, aspects of life, and we figured out. Oh, actually, yes, there is one. I just thought of one. It's one that we already did say no to, but we're kind of right in that middle of it.
Mhm.
So I mentioned before that my wife did music professionally for a long time, pre kids. I've done music my whole life. I've been involved. You knew me as a drummer back in the day
Yeah.
in school. Did a lot of guitar. So because of that, you get a lot of different opportunities. This past year, I was a part of my company does this big battle of the bands, and we have over 1,000 people here, and we're in Nashville, so the level of musicality is just through the roof.
Yeah.
And so we put this big event, and a lot of people played professionally. A lot of people toured all around, and we just have this big battle. And the band I was in actually won last
No way.
year,
Yeah.
and it was a lot of time and energy, and it was fun, and it was a blast. And I already said I'm not doing that again this year.
Yeah.
I was like, that was kind of a one-time thing. Well, I've done it a bunch, and now I'm like, you know what? I'll let some other people do this. I'll be happy to just go out on top.
That sounds great. Sounds like you got to experience the highest of highs in that plane. And now you can
Yes.
say no, right? It's a thing that you got to do and got to experience at the highest level in that way.
Yep.
That's great. That's great. Because what it does is if you were to say yes again, you feel like it would take away from some of the other priorities you've identified. Is that?
Yeah, it took a lot of time. Actually, it's funny because over my shoulder here are a couple of the posters from the years. Like the one up top is uh, Thunder Sisters and the Debt Free Screams, and I guess I should have tossed out there that I eventually did start working for Dave Ramsey 11 and a half years ago. Um,
Yes, full circle. There it is.
yeah, and then the best part about it is see that one right there. It's called The New Hip. That was because our drummer had an accident and had to have a hip replacement. So our band was The New Hip, and that's an
Oh,
X-ray
that's good.
of his hip.
That's an
So,
X-ray.
yeah.
Oh my gosh, I can see the X-ray now. That's funny.
Can you see it?
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's great.
So I think that
And
there's a lot of those kind of things in life that you start to look at and be like, could I do this? Yes. Should I do this? Probably not.
yeah, the way I like to look at that kind of stuff is what version of it makes sense for me now.
Right.
It's like, how
Yeah.
do I still get to experience that really cool, that connection,
Mhm.
that community, that creativity, the fun, in a way that makes sense for this phase or this next upcoming thing. Um, I don't like to have to give up things anymore.
Yeah,
I may be
totally.
giving up that box that I used to check. For me, I gave up playing basketball. I played a ton of pickup basketball, and then
Mm,
post back surgery, it was my
mm.
wife's insistence. She's like, you have a 100% success rate when you go out, or injury rate. You have a 100% injury rate when you go play. You're always bruised, and let's just figure out a new thing for you. So I don't play basketball, but I do other things. I play pickleball is a thing that I
That
do.
that was one of the reasons. It's so funny. I had a bruise on my arm for about 3 months from
Yeah.
playing basketball. We called it dad ball. It was 3-on-3. It was in the morning.
Yeah.
And this guy elbowed me, and I would twist my ankles, and I just was always
Yeah.
feeling it. And my Apple Watch would one day told me that my heart rate got up to 190, and I was like, I don't think this is good. And I went out and played pickleball, and my average heart rate was around 140.
Yeah.
Max was like 155, and I'm
Right.
dripping with
Right.
sweat, and I'm like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
this is my thing.
Yeah. Much better alternative, more sustainable, right?
Yeah, Joe, you said something that I wanted to keep on for a second, which is you said one of the things that I really connect with, even let's just say back to that Battle of the Bands thing. I like to think with the information I have right now, I make a
Mhm.
decision. So I'm not saying that I'll never be in a band again. I'm saying that with the information I have right now, my best decision is to not do that this year. If we get
Yes.
to a different spot and with the information that I have, then it makes sense. I want to do it. I need an outlet. Then I'll make that decision and I won't have to feel guilty about it.
And how freeing is that not to have to make a final decision on anything, frankly?
Right. It's a big deal.
I love that. Yeah. I love that. I also embrace that idea as well. It's very freeing, right? It reduces the
Mhm.
stakes in a lot of instances of like, oh, I'm no longer am I someone who does this thing. Like I'm not for now and maybe for the foreseeable future. And I may not ever be, but I don't have to decide that right now based on the
Right.
information that I currently have.
I think
Thanks
that
for
takes
calling
an
that out.
element of humility to be able to do that. You and I were talking about a drink that I found out had some artificial things that I really just didn't want, and
Yeah.
I had some left of it, and I had to sit, and I had this new information. I was in this limbo of like, but I like this thing, and you're like, but I know this could potentially hurt my body,
Yeah.
and I threw it away because I was like,
Yeah.
I now have new information. And
Yeah.
if I'm not willing to walk away, then I'm not humble enough. And that starts to question my intelligence. And then this starts thinking about addiction and all of that. If I'm not willing to give it up, then I probably wasn't going after it for the right reason.
Yeah. I mean, very simply stated, but it was a challenge for you. It was a struggle for you to actually end up doing it, it sounds like.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Real quick, just a quick one-liner. I think anyone listening to this would appreciate hearing the name of your wife's former group so they can do a Google search and go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, sure. She was in the band Everlife. It was her and her two sisters, and they ended up getting signed to Hollywood Records and did a lot with Disney. So back in the day when It was like the Miley Cyrus, Hannah Montana tours, and the Jonas Brothers and Cheetah Girls, and all of that. Everlife was right there with. So she played guitar, and so I was their drummer for 5 years, and so before all of the big arena tours, and so I would just do things every once in a while. I played drums off and on. I got the opportunity to play percussion, opening up for the Jonas Brothers in Bridgestone Arena in Nashville, and then some of the Europe tours and things like that. I played guitar, electric guitar for. So we had a lot of fun, and they had a good 16, 17-year run, and it was time for them to just be sisters. It was right after that was when we started having kids, and it just was a perfect time for them to be done. And they actually have been starting to have some fun doing some things and teasing maybe they write a couple of songs in the future.
Here we go. Keep the theme up of you never know. No final answer on anything, right? Got new information, new phases. I love it. Thank you. That's cool. Thanks for sharing that. I mean, we could spend the rest of time talking about that, but I refuse.
Okay.
You and I can talk about that later.
Sounds good.
What area in your life feels just about perfect?
Man, I struggled with that, answering that one. I've been thinking about that for days because I really hate in my head thinking of anything as perfect.
Yeah. Many people do, by the way. I know it's a triggering word, which is why I use it. I also throw it in quotes, but tell me about your struggles here a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I tossed out, and I said that when we hit that little quick, I said my relationship with Amber, and I want to be clear. We're not perfect even a little bit. But if you're talking to some of my close friends or you're talking to our family, we have been very intentional, and we've been together for a long time. We've been together for 22 years, married for 18. We've kind of grown up together. We've learned a lot, and that has drawn us very close. And so we've had a lot of bumps along the way, like everybody has, and we just keep trying to draw closer and closer together. So that's why, if I have to say one area of my life is just perfect, it's not but we'll say that's the closest right now.
Yeah, that's fair. Is it associated with the idea of it being the most developed part of your life?
That's probably a better way of saying that. Yeah, I think that's a great description. It's been the most attention, most intentionality, most hardship, the most probably stretching in every way.
Yeah.
So that's why I would say that.
Yeah, right on. Not that you asked me, but my answer is the same. The most perfect part of my life is your relationship with your wife.
Nice.
Yeah.
Good.
Who is someone you admire, and what do you admire about them?
Yeah, his name's Darren Tyler. Man, he is what a cool guy. I met him. Here's how we met. 19 years ago, we moved to Nashville, and I mentioned before, faith has always been an element of our life, and I had been in college actively involved in just Bible studies or a campus group, anything that got connected. And we moved to Nashville and had none of that. And there was this guy that we heard about. His name's Darren Tyler, who's in the music industry. He managed a bunch of bands, and he was just kind of this rock and roll manager guy who led a Bible study for young adults on Wednesday nights. And we're like, hey, let's check it out. We go there and just connected with this guy. He had no ego, and he wasn't out to prove anything. He just had this passion for teaching the Bible, and we connected with him. And that was 19 years ago. Still, and through the last 19 years, we've been through a lot. But one of the things that we did together was we launched a nonprofit organization called Conduit Mission. And it's when we started feeding kids in Haiti. We started building wells in Africa. We started working with drug and alcohol rehabilitation center called Place of Hope in Columbia, Tennessee. We started doing these different things, but he was the guy he would find out about a need. He would find out about something that was going on in the area, and he would do something about it. And I'd be like, all right, let's go. Let's do this together. So Eventually, we started a nonprofit. He was president, I was vice president, and we just started feeding kids. And then the Haiti earthquake happened, and we were actually already in Haiti in Jacmel. We were
Yeah.
already doing a lot of work. We had already been there. Like I'd been there to Haiti to oversee, and we were seeing what was going on and working with people there. And so all of a sudden, we started having hundreds of thousands of dollars flowing through us and feeding kids and building schools. And that's been something that we've continued. Along the way, he decided to stop being the artist manager, and decided to be a pastor. And so
Mhm.
together we helped launch a church in the area. And it's a church that eventually the nonprofit merged into the church, where now everything that we've done has just exploded. We've given away over $10 million. We've now freed. A lot of people don't know that there's parts of the world right now that slavery is bigger than ever the European trade. That whole time period, there's more slaves right now in the world
Wow.
than ever before. And so we found an area where we could help in these brick kilns, where families would take on a debt for a medical debt, might be for their grandpa or
Mhm.
their dad, and they work and make bricks their whole life. And so we found a way to start freeing these families and paying off the debts of these families. And so
Wow.
we've now freed a few hundred families, and we have plans for thousands more already. But Darren's the guy that there's a lot of people who hear problems. I like to say the world is full of a lot of problem spotters and very few
Mhm.
problem solvers. He is for sure a problem solver, and we've been able to see him. He's leading a team in Israel right now, and so I just really look up to him. He's a great guy.
Yeah, that sounds like a very powerful force to have in your life for such a long
Mhm.
time too. Sounds like a lot
Yeah,
of time and energy went into that relationship as well over the years. I mean, decades plus now.
yeah, absolutely. It's
Wow.
actually stronger than ever because of that, and I think that's also because he is such a humble, intentional guy.
Yeah.
There's I can't think of anything in his life that's not intentional, especially with what he does with his career, with his calling, and he's been able to impact just millions and millions of people.
Yeah. No big deal. Right.
Yeah,
Just life changing at that scale. It's incredible. That's great.
yeah.
All right. So, a slacker like you, what do you imagine some people admire about you?
um, I think if I'm listing like on a resume, or if I'm applying for a job, I'm going to put pretty high up there deductive reasoning skills, problem solver, because that's something I love to do. I
Mhm.
love to get in the weeds on things. I love to solve a complex problem.
Mhm.
But I'd say that part of that is there's a steadiness and consistency that I work very hard to be. Um, my my personality is very even keeled. Um, if you've ever heard of something like the Enneagram, is something that is pretty popular these days. I'm
Mhm.
the peacemaking challenger, the Enneagram 9 wing 8. So there's like this
Mhm.
peacemaking side where I love to bring peace to something, but that doesn't mean I avoid conflict. It just means I try to create peace. And I think that's
Mhm.
what carries into problem solving is I look at a problem as something that I can try to solve to bring peace to, bring clarity, bring uh,
Yeah.
some type of insight to.
Yeah, that makes sense. Give me an example on a very surface level.
Yeah. So um, first 18-ish years of career wise, I was always in sales and leading sales. And then 4 years ago, I was asked by our head of HR, "Hey, would you consider taking on recruiting for the company?" And so I did that. Now I've been leading recruiting. But one of the things that comes with that is a lot of interaction with teams, with leaders who are thinking about, how do I process through, I have this person, is this the right person for the job? So one of my roles is people will bring these complex, I have this role that I need to fill. We have this person. How do I know if these fit together? It's a regular part of my world is where I get to break it down and say, all right, let's talk about this. And by the end, we can always come up with whether or not we feel like this is the person for it. So I
Yeah.
love solving and being a part of anything people related, just in general.
Yeah. I hear it. I hear it. That's cool. What other thoughts or ideas would you like to share? This is your platform now for the next several moments. What would you like to share with folks in the name of intentionality?
Hmm. One of the things that I've been thinking about since you and I started talking, and I listened to some of the podcasts and started thinking about intentionally ever after, which at some point I'd love to know from you how you came to be, why this platform, why
Yeah.
going here. But um, the thing that kept jumping out to me about living intentionally and myself, decisions I've made, others around me who I can say I look and see that their lives are, I want to be similar to them. I want to try to do things like them. Is I've noticed that in our world today, there's an obsession with ourself, and there's a lot of self healing things. There's a lot of I can dive into my story. I can dive into why am I this way, and I can uncover. And people naturally go and are drawn to things that make them look inward.
Mm.
An observation that I've had is that I feel the best, I interact the best when I am putting others, when I'm thinking about others, when I care about other people,
Mm.
when I care about somebody else's story, and um, and when I work on myself to make sure that I'm the best version of myself, that I'm taking care of myself, that I'm taking care of my mind and my body and my spirit, all those types of things. But when I only make it about me, then I get stuck.
Mm.
But when I'm very intentional about seeing the world that I'm in and interacting like I'm just one of the pieces of the story that's going on, then I instantly, my worldview opens up. And I realize that that's when I find opportunities to help those around me who are unfortunate or uh, don't have money, don't have the opportunity. And when I went to Haiti and saw, I remember an image that I'll never forget for my whole life, because I saw 1,000 people lined up in a row selling the same fruit,
Mm.
knowing full well no one's going to buy this fruit. And when I saw, I've been able to travel and do some different missions work, and I remember being in Brazil, and we visited the garbage dumps, and I saw people rooting for food because that's what they needed to live that day.
Yeah.
Um, I've seen these different things that have opened up my worldview to say, uh, what can I do to impact this? How can I use a platform? How can I interact? What are the decisions that I can make today to help others? And when I did that, I started seeing that I'm blessing other people. And in the meantime, I felt like I'm growing as well.
Hmm.
So when I talk about Darren Tyler, when I think of there's lists of people in my life who like I want to be like or who are world changers, they aren't just obsessed with themselves. They are
Mm.
very outward focused of helping other people.
Yeah. I want to throw this idea out, wonder if it connects or how it might
Okay.
connect. The idea that we're all about self fulfillment. Okay. And for some people, that's look at me, I'm great.
Mhm.
Let me make sure I get what I want. But for others, their fulfillment comes from helping others. What do you think of that idea? Does that connect at all? But it's all
So,
about self fulfillment.
mhm. Oh, yeah, there's definitely a difference. You can tell somebody, you can spend 5 minutes with someone and you can realize if their whole goal is self fulfillment. It's why, I mean, you spend any time on a lot of the social media platforms right now, you see a lot of
Yeah.
look at me in this, here's my good angle. Here's the best. You get the best of all of these things. And have you ever met somebody in real life and you're like, you don't even look the same. What
Ah,
in the world?
sure. Sure, sure.
And that's where I feel like that's obsession of self.
Yeah.
Um, and some people, like you said, there's this. It's almost like a selfless. There's the outside going to help somebody else, but there's a balance with that as well. Because one of the things that Darren talks about quite often was the first few years of launching these nonprofits that he didn't realize it, but it was for a lot of selfish reasons. It was a lot of his growing up in poverty, and
Yeah.
and he had a counselor really challenge him and say, hey, what would it be like to not have to do this for your own fulfillment, but just because you wanted to help somebody else? And it felt like it was just mind blowing for him.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what my wondering was that in that area is, can there be self-fulfillment as a driver that isn't selfish?
Hmm.
Can that exist as an idea? Like, you get your fulfillment from helping others. Is that acceptable without it being selfish?
Probably, but it's probably limited as well. Like,
Mm.
it's limiting. It probably has a limit of how much you'll actually get fulfilled by it.
I think I need to noodle on that one for a little bit. It's part of my job too, is to push back and when someone makes statements, to kind of see where that line is. I'm very curious
No,
about
no.
it though,
Yeah.
because I'm very much about fulfillment,
Mhm.
very much, right? It's my word is intentionality, obviously, but fulfillment
Yeah.
is very closely tied to that.
Mm.
Would you say that you are fulfilled in life?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't feel like
Yes.
I'm done.
Sure.
Like,
Oh, thank goodness.
yeah, I don't feel like I have a fulfillment, like I've accomplished all the things I'm here to do.
Hmm.
But I sleep very well, and I go to work every day enjoying what I do.
Hmm.
I don't when I hear people talking about, oh, it's Monday, and like,
Right.
no, I get up and it's Monday. I get to go do this thing.
Yeah.
That's a big deal, and I know I don't take that for granted, because I know that not everybody can be at that spot. And there are seasons. I have not always been there. There's been times
Sure.
where it's like, this is exhausting, or this is hard work. But I think that's why, there's definitely a theme. If you don't know me and you're just hearing me for the first time, there's an element of faith that has probably been through this entire thing. And I understand that not everybody comes from that perspective. And I'm not naive to that. But I will say that for me, one of the things that's always been very fulfilling, or it's allowed me to be fulfilled, is to feel like I'm a part of something that's bigger than myself. That I'm not making all the rules. I'm not here on this earth just because I was here. I feel like there's a bigger story happening,
Mm.
and I feel blessed to just be a part of it. So there's this fulfillment of knowing what I'm doing in my day is contributing in the best way that I can, and challenging myself when I'm not, but also know I don't feel the pressure that I have to be the one to solve everything. I'm not the one that feels that pressure, that anxiety, that I
Right.
have to solve all of the world's problems that was never mine to solve. So I feel like that, to me, that helps me feel fulfilled.
That's great. Well, sir, at the risk of ending very abruptly, I want to be conscious of your time, and I so appreciate the consideration you've given to this conversation and these questions, and also to make sure that we still have stuff to talk about. I'm going to end it right here. Thank you so much for showing up and sharing your insights, your stories, your experiences, and
Thanks for having me.
here's to absolutely here's to the next phase of the Joe and Jeremy show. How about that?
Sounds good.
This has been Intentionally Ever After, hosted by intentional lifestyle coach Joe Bukartek. If you would like to have your own intentional conversation with Joe on or off the air, visit intentionallyeverafter.com. Thanks for listening.